members of the committee to see what the starting point is. Those are my suggestions. If you're comfortable with those, and Chair's going to circulate those to you, then that would be on the next agenda for a report to come, giving you that background and your opportunity to question the cabinet members. Is what I suggested on that one.
And Cromwell, and very much, I think, for do you want to, again, Mark, do you want to say what you said, but it's another one really those property.
I think Crowmarsh is an interesting one because I think there's two bigger agendas at play on this one, particularly joint local plan and the current position on that. And I won't say any more in a public forum on that at the moment. And secondly, local government reorganisation, which could determine what we do with that particular asset. So speaking to officers quickly on that one, I felt it's not appropriate to do at the moment because of those two big things at play. And that was the suggestion, or that was a recommendation from my officer colleagues.
As you know, the Cromwell site is in the joint local plan. That's a public document. So
yes, I know, but I think that's irrelevant. That site is still there.
But as an allocation, it's there in a public document. So that's where it is now. That's what council is doing with it or suggesting to do with it.
Don't think that's good enough. Sorry.
Especially, Chair, when we're under pressure for a 5-year land supply, that would help towards it.
Some of it could.
If it was housing. Been dragging on a long time.
Well, you know the status of the joint local plan at the moment. So.
Yeah, I say I don't think that's a relevant point.
Well, if you can give some more details about that, I think that would be really helpful. But I think that's what we've had in response from officers, and I think it's clear enough for all. Yeah. Any more comments on the work plan?
Would add one from the council plan quarterly performance report. Speaking with my colleague Tim earlier, I believe they're almost in their final knockings and will be available on our website shortly. So that is an item you could program for your probably first meeting in 2026 to look at what that document is saying in terms of performance of the councils.
That would be good. No more comments, okay. Shall we move on? So our first item is the substantive item is the planning enforcement update. And we're asked to consider the current performance in determining enforcement cases and receive an update in relation to outstanding cases and then review the suggested areas for improvement in the report to support more effective and timely resolution of planning enforcement cases. I think it might be useful if I just, before we invite the cabinet member, just to say that Dale's Scrutiny Committee looked at the same report, and as you know, we share the officers and the policies around this, especially within in relation to enforcement. They came up with 6 draft recommendations. I thought it might be useful for us just to read them out. The first was to differentiate the enforcement approach for major site disputes versus small and neighbour individual disputes. Secondly, consider the communication methods to notify ward members when enforcement case changes its status. Thirdly, to start to capture data on rejected, non-relevant cases, working with customer services team who manage that triage process. They were saying that can patterns be identified to assist with informing residents on what's relevant to enforcement. Fourthly, consider communications approach to people who submitted an enforcement inquiry on case progress. Fifthly, consider whether compliance guides or informative video could be produced to help assist residents with navigating the enforcement system. And finally, early proactive intervention on a permanent small scale. Of course, we don't have to repeat what they said, but I thought it was useful that they were the recommendations they came up with. So first of all, I'll invite Councillor Simpson to come and present.
Thank you. Thank you, councillors and officers in the room, and those on screen as well to support. So planning enforcement, as you know, is a very public-facing function, and most people probably don't have to interact with it until they actually experience a problem with development in their neighbourhood. I just want to really point out that we do take it very seriously at South Oxfordshire. I've been in this role since 2020 and worked on the current enforcement statement with officers and the triage system back in 2021 when it was then adopted. And we have a dedicated team and that of enforcement officers, which not all councils do. That's just how seriously we take it. So this report provides an update on planning enforcement, including current performance in determining cases and proposed improvements to support effective and timely resolutions of enforcement issues. The Scrutiny Committee last received an update on planning enforcement in November 2023. The National Planning Policy Framework, the NPPF, outlines the discretionary nature of enforcement action, while emphasising its importance in maintaining public confidence in the planning system. And the planning practice guidance builds on this by highlighting that breaches of planning control can often be resolved more efficiently without formal enforcement action, such as through voluntary compliance or the submission of retrospective planning applications. So that's planning practice guidance. As noted in paragraph 10 of the report, the majority of enforcement cases are closed through voluntary compliance. This reflects the proactive work of officers in engaging with landowners to remove breaches from land or buildings without formal proceedings. And from paragraph 14 of the report, it identifies several areas for improvement aimed at enhancing efficiency and overall performance. So you've got the monthly tracker for aged cases. A tracker has been introduced for cases over 30 weeks old. This is shared monthly with the Cabinet member, myself, and provides updates to help progress outcomes on older cases. Secondly, we've got the review of the planning enforcement statement. So the current statement outlines timescales and procedural steps for enforcement investigations. And a review is proposed to clarify these steps, define actions more precisely, and enable monitoring through the process. So these are areas we'd really like to hear from you, your input on. Case closure protocols. It's suggested that enforcement investigations be closed upon receipt of a planning application or the lodging of an appeal. This reflects the shift in responsibility to the planning or appeal process and avoids duplication of recording cases. So definitely we would like your input on that. And anticipated legislative changes, future changes to legislation are expected, which will necessitate updates to the enforcement statement. If you have any particular questions on that, I'm very likely to turn to my left and ask Adrian to step in. The big ones, of course, are the Planning and Infrastructure Bill and Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill that are working through Parliament. So in summary, I'm really interested to hear what the committee thinks about the current performance, and particularly interested in any further suggestions or ideas for improvement the committee has to maximise the use of the tools we have available and to be as efficient and effective as we can be. And I'll do my best to answer any questions, and I do have Adrian Duffield alongside me, Head of Service, for any of technical responses. As I've already pointed out, anything to do with legislation. Also, a reminder that we cannot get into the details of any specific cases. That's quite important, I feel, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to add anything to that?
No, that's very clear. Thank you.
Okay, so shall I open up the floor for questions? We'll start with Molly.
Yes, I don't know how you want this, Joe. I've got 5 questions, so shall I just ask one and then Cabinet member answered and then give somebody else the opportunity?
Yeah, that would be nice.
Okay. I'll start with the first one actually, because we had Councillor May earlier. Can you just tell me what engagement the enforcement team has with the parish council at the moment?
Well, they report the breach. You've got to remember that planning enforcement, I'll take you back to the planning enforcement statement. The planning enforcement statement makes quite clear that investigations are conducted on behalf of the council, not on the behalf of those reporting the breaches. So obviously, if you look at the enforcement statement, they get notified, they report the breach. We're very keen to encourage, obviously, members of the public to report any suspected breaches. So they get notified when they report the breach that it's being picked up. And then I believe, is it at 6 weeks? Again, they should get another notice.
We get notified the outcome of the investigation. One of the improvements we've suggested in the report is that we provide a communication during the enforcement process to keep complainants, parish councils advised that we're still investigating at that stage.
So just following up on that, so do you think what Councillor May is asking for is a good idea or not?
I think I've got to go several steps back, because I think listening to Councillor May, I think what he is reflecting, I don't know, for those of you who have been in the council a bit longer, if you remember when we first brought in the triage system and the enforcement statement, the current enforcement statement, there was quite a lot of misunderstanding around the district over what enforcement did or does or doesn't do. And I think it was seen at that time by quite a few parish councils and perhaps members of the public as a policing system. And it's not a policing system. If you read the guidance that we have in the MPPF and the planning practice guidance that you have, which is picked up in our enforcement statement, it is very much about voluntary compliance and bringing people into the planning system. It's not simply a continuation of a planning application. So I think that the system as we have at the moment with reporting is correct because of the GDPR. I don't know, or those of you who've been on the council longer will also remember that I think planning previous to adopting this current enforcement statement and triage system, I think that there had been a system where there was ad hoc updates given to people who reported breaches. So there was an expectation that that would continue, but actually we found that that wasn't actually legally compliant. So that's why we brought in the GDPR point, where we only provide updates at the end. So there's no notification that the case has been opened, that's sent out. And then we say very clearly in our enforcement statement that you will be notified of the outcome of the investigation. So anyone who reports the breach or sends information in on that particular breach once the case is opened, or suspected breach, I should add, because of course some of them are not actually found to be breaches in the end, they will be notified of the outcome.
Can I just add, in terms of those reports that we send back to the complainant, it's not just about it's not expedient or not taking action, or we are taking action. We actually provide an explanation to why we've come to the conclusion that we have done. So there's a bit more than just purely not expedient, is that a bit more information that sits behind it. I think just to add also, we as a council have offered, and we do run parish council, town and parish council sessions regarding planning, of which one aspect has always been planning enforcement and how we run that function within the council in line with the statement. So we do, that's part of the engagement in terms of keeping the town and parishes up to date. We did a change this year following legislation changes, and we will no doubt be holding next year sometime a session for town and parishes regarding planning, because there's been a lot of changes, and that will also include, I'm sure, a session or a section regarding planning enforcement and how we carry out the function.
Okay, shall we move on to Councillor Topham?
Yeah, thank you. Councillor May asked a specific question about the number of stop notices that are served in a typical year. Are you able to answer that?
I can pick it out on the system. It's all publicly available. I think the key is the effectiveness of a planning enforcement service is not the number of formal notices we serve.
No,
the key here is, as in line as the Cabinet mentioned, in paragraph 90 in your report, the MPPF and the PPG sets out very clearly our approach, and formal action is the last resort.
But he seemed to indicate there were none, and I'm sure that there aren't none.
Well, I can tell you the last 3 months we've served 2 temporary stop notices, which is, the key is that the action we take, whether it's a stop notice or enforcement notice, it's proportionate to the particular breach of planning. So you would have seen something on the news this afternoon where the courts have set aside and said an injunction on this particular planning breach was not proportionate or commensurate with the type of breach. That's what we have to, as officers, to make that judgment in discussion with legal colleagues about whether we think that the action that we're going to be taking is proportionate to the type of breach. So we always involve the legal team to make that challenge to the planning officers.
But I think the key thing is that the developer or householder has to believe that if the worst comes to the worst, there could be a stop notice, and it could cost them a lot of money to rectify an overdevelopment or an added extension, as Councillor May was talking about.
A stop notice is quite different. We do it on a listed building, for example, because that's where you get in a situation you can't recover the damage that could have been done. On a normal development, it's rare we would do stop notices. Across the country, they are rarely provided. I think that was accepted. Maybe an enforcement notice, that may be appropriate. And the enforcement notice is actually probably more meaningful, because obviously if you serve a stop notice, you have to follow it through with an enforcement notice behind it. So it's the same sort of process. That will achieve the outcome ultimately in terms of the regularisation that we are seeking. Recognise that obviously in terms of stop notices, and not that this is an issue, but there's compensation factors that are part of the stop notice involvement. So we've got to be careful how and when we use such form of notices.
Councillor Arnold.
Actually, this is probably a question for you, Adrian. Sorry about that. Looking at the graph on page 10, we've obviously reduced in a year from 259 to 251. I think a simple question is, do we have enough staff dealing with this?
Yeah, I think so. When we did a restructure of the service, and this followed actually the enforcement statement in 2021 or thereabouts when we adopted it, we did a review of the service in 2023. As part of that process, we actually increased the staffing resource in planning enforcement. We actually didn't increase it overall. We moved it from the applications team across into enforcement. It took us 2 years to recruit to that post. That individual only started literally a month ago. And the area that we needed the support was in the more complex cases. And the officer we've got is someone who's got a lot of years of experience that we've been able to recruit. We do have an additional agency person in the team. Again, that's because we want to try and deal with the more complex and the older cases, the older than 30 weeks, for example, want to reduce that number down. So I would say we have got enough resources in the team. We've got the appropriate resource that deals with the cases that we have and is consistent in terms of the statement, which is about the process and our approach to planning enforcement. So I would say, yes, we are far more, we say this publicly, but we're far better off than a lot of other councils in Oxfordshire for planning enforcement.
Could I just come back on that quickly?
Can we let Councillor Simpson?
Yeah, I'd like to add to that, because you're looking at the number 215, you're saying, have we got the resources? But also, this is an opportunity also for scrutiny to advise on, or to give your opinion on, which is, sort of for openness and transparency. We've got some duplication in those figures, because we've got cases that are subject to enforcement investigation, and I think we were talking about it before, and then you might go into a retrospective planning application, in which case it's being counted twice. It's being counted here and also in the planning application side of things. So what we'd like to hear from Scrutiny is if they think it would be a good idea maybe to separate those cases out. They won't get lost. They will be brought back in depending on the outcome of that planning application, and perhaps even be brought back in a better format, because at the moment they sit there as a breach for, I don't know, something to do with a building or whatever, and then they go to planning application, and then perhaps they go back out because the planning application's been not approved, or it's been approved but with conditions. in which case it actually needs to come back in with those conditions being monitored rather than as an enforcement case as it was first reported. So that was just something to throw back to scrutiny, please.
Yeah, I understand that as well. So basically then, if we got enough staff, do you think by this time next year we will see those organ stops a lot lower down?
Yes, I think, I mean, they are complex cases, but I think we're bringing the right resource and we've got the right resource now in-house to be able to deal with those complex cases and deal with it. But some of them might still end up, we might serve an enforcement notice, it might go to an appeal. That's where the enforcement system, set out by government clearly, can take such a long time. And it's frustrating not only for officers, but clearly for the community as well itself.
Totally understand that. Yeah. Thank you.
What can you do?
Yeah, a few of my questions have already been answered, but I've just got a couple more. I'll combine these two. Do you think the monthly tracker will improve accountability? And do you think the triage system has actually worked?
I think the triage system has worked very well, actually. And I know that in the early days, officers looked at it to get the balance right. And I don't believe there's any indication that that balance needs to change in terms of assessing planning harm. They're always reviewing it because, of course, new legislation will come in as well. So it's constantly being reviewed. But I think I'm quite excited about this monthly tracker coming in now because it's been introduced for cases over 30 weeks. I think it was ballpark 6 months. And we do need to focus on those older cases. I think that was a point that's just been raised. And I think that focus for officers now, they've got time, having got those huge numbers down from that were sort of legacy numbers down to what we have now at a manageable amount. They can now focus on things like this monthly tracker, look at those old cases and make sure that they are being monitored and that there's some performance relative to the monitoring of them. And, I mean, I would like to hopefully see, sorry, Adrian, but I'd like to hopefully see if this works well, because it's quite new introduction, that we can reduce it maybe to cases over 3 months, possibly, if scrutiny think that's a good idea. So.
Yeah, I've got a question. I think that's fine.
You okay? Yeah, I'm combined.
So what my question is around this graph is really helpful. Paragraph 7, and it shows that in paragraph 6 that you have 418 in 2022, and then you're going from 300. It's gone down to 250. But what I don't understand from that is, and some of these cases that have been closed are really, small numbers really in relation to that, especially, on your diagram, it's clear. So your target is to get that down, but I'm just wondering about the turnover and churn, and whether you think the capacity in the team is enough to get that down, and what your sort of target is for if you like, what your target is for the next year or 2 years for a sort of healthy. Because obviously you can't get it down to 0. That's not the point of this. If you have cases coming and going and being dealt with in a timely manner as possible.
Yes, you're always going to have an on-hand case in the system. That's a fair point. I mean, to be fair, I think probably 2 years ago, the chief exec at that time gave, I want you to hit 300 or whatever. It was a target, which we then used resources. We brought in resources from the team to do that. We've got to a situation, as you can see, since September last year, we've plateaued. And that's why we brought in, it's the more complex cases, having analysed our on-hand data, which is why we've now got that tracker, which is over 30 weeks. It's the more complex cases. We brought in the extra agency support to start to have a look at those and concentrate on those more complex cases. The issue about timing is that we might end up saying, right, we're coming to a conclusion, we're either going to serve an enforcement notice, for example, it then goes to appeal. So we then have to follow that through. And serving an enforcement notice, compliance might be a year, and then during that process they may have gone to appeal, so that extends it for another year. So you could be talking, that's just one case, could be going on for 2 or 3 more years. And it's a question of how we manage those in the system. So as an example was given, we are looking at, once it goes to, if it turns into a planning application, then actually we will close the enforcement case, so that starts to reduce the numbers. And I think we talk in the report that we can drop the numbers, is it by 18%? I think it is on under paragraph 8, you've got the little diagram that talks about cases over 30 weeks and under 30 weeks. A percentage of that is application and appeals. We can reduce that number pretty quickly by 18%. So that's taking 80% off your 250 odd, for example. That starts to bring the numbers down. So the caseload is manageable with the resource that we have. It's just the fact every case that comes in is some can be complex, some can be easy to deal with. I think it may be helpful, and you may have comments on this as a committee, that in the graph we've combined what I call open cases, the on hand, and then it's the wrong scale to be able to see it. It's all the same scale, but it's not very clear to see actually how many are open and how many are closed. I get that on a weekly basis, which is part of the monitoring within the service. And we generally are generally closing more than we're opening, which is why generally the figures are coming down. But I think that open and closed cases, if we provided that perhaps in a clearer and bigger chart, might be helpful to see the numbers and the direction of travel that we're working towards. But in terms of your question about a target or over a number of years, we could do that, but it's a bit finger in the air because it depends on the cases that we've got. And I think what we're putting in place now, which is like the tracker, for example, which means they're being reviewed every month, not only by myself and the manager, the service manager, but also the cabinet member and cabinet can come back and challenge and question us on those things as well, which I think will be helpful.
I know I'm not allowed to go into detail about a specific case, but I have one case on it. I won't say where it is or go into any of the detail of it, but it strikes me as somebody that's been in property for 3 years that what's going on this side is unbelievably blatant. Strangely, it's come to me direct, not from the parish council involved. And there are 3 immediate neighbours who are contacting me on a regular basis. I've developed what I think is a very good relationship with one of your team, who I think is doing an extremely good job. But it's only really because I'm very persistent that I think I'm getting a lot of feedback from him. And I think if I was one level removed, if I was on the parish council, I might not be getting the same level of engagement. And I was just wondering if there could be some sort of monthly report, because I now get 3 different neighbours emailing most weeks saying what's happening. And I do say to them, just be patient. But to have some sort of monthly report, even if it's just one line, just to say we went to see the site last week, there should be something in 6-8 weeks' time, it would be extremely useful for me. And I'm lucky, I've only got one very active case on, but it takes up a surprising amount of time.
Is this the question time? So
yeah, the question is, could we have a monthly report?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer is no, because if you go to our enforcement statement, you have it quite clearly stated there that it wouldn't be GDPR compliant to do that. But what we are hoping to do, because we're very aware that people, because we do rely on residents, we do rely on parish councils for those reports of suspected breaches and then for any updates to those breaches. So I've always say to members, please do encourage them to continue any new information to feed it into the officers. I'll get back to what members can do separately, but I think it's really what we're looking at doing, possibly because we have the new IT system coming in. What we recognise is that people think it's gone into a black hole because they don't hear anything. They think nothing's happening, and that is far from the case. Usually there is something happening, but it's an investigation that's being conducted by the council, and obviously that information does not get shared beyond the council. Ward members can have that information, but it's not for sharing outside of the council. Ward members can find out what's going on in cases at any time. They can go to officers, as you may be aware, and get an update. But then I'd always recommend that members then say to the officer, what can I say outside? And usually it continues to be a live investigation. So what we're hoping to do with the new system, the new dev system, is to have some sort of trigger after a period of time just to remind people that it is still a live investigation, then it hasn't been forgotten. The people that have reported the suspected breaches or are aware there's a live case, just to say it's still ongoing.
And how long until that new system is up and running?
We are hoping it'll be in the spring next year.
Okay, that's quite soon. Thank you.
More questions, Councillor Turner?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm conscious that we haven't really answered Mr. May's question so far. Is there anything we could have done in enforcement which would have enabled the parish council to think, well, yeah, we don't like what they've said at the council, but we do understand it. It seems to me this communication broken down. I just wonder if there's, I mean, I've read what he said, and we've had a number of similar cases where somebody buys a semi-detached house, gets a planning permission for something, and then buys the one next door, wants to knock them into two houses, and that causes a lot of upset. But I'm just wondering if there's what we could do that maybe not satisfy Mr. May's parish council, but that they would understand the difficulties.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back to really understanding what planning enforcement can and can't do. It was something we had to address much more across the district a few years ago. And it really is, I really would point to the enforcement statement. I think I heard Councillor May say he doesn't want to focus on process and legislation or something similar to that, but actually planning is, this might not be a statutory responsibility in terms of having to conduct planning enforcement. It's sort of a non-statutory, if you like, but there are still laws to go to define what you can and can't do. And the planning policy guidance is it planning policy guidance, PPG, is very clear on that proportionality aspect, planning harm, proportionality, and voluntary compliance is definitely where government pushes us to go. So I would really encourage not to dismiss the planning enforcement statement. It's actually very clear in our approach. And there's a little video also on the website, our website, to direct people to, because the more people that go and have a look at it and be reminded of what we can do and can't do, I think it's helpful. It won't satisfy some people, because there will always be some people who want it to be a policing function, and it's not. It just can't be. It's just not there in the legislation and the PPG guidance, or PPG.
Can I just add to the example he's provided? So the parish were keen that we serve a stop notice. But actually what we said, we invited a retrospective application that came in, we then granted consent. So actually what we were saying, this is the issue where maybe there's some frustration, is actually, albeit there was a non-compliance to the original permission, but actually they regularised it, and we regularised it through a planning application that had conditions that we can attach. We served a stop notice that would have not been proportionate to the type of breach. And actually, also in that situation, bear in mind, we think actually it can be resolved through a planning application. That is what the government are telling us we should be doing. We take that proportionate approach with the type of plan, the amount of planning harm that's involved. There wasn't the planning harm, although the parish might think it might be, there wasn't the planning harm that warrants a stop notice or even an enforcement notice. So I do understand, and that's why we try to provide, as the cabinet members mentioned, the statement that sets out our approach. We've got the video online to try and provide it in fairly simple terms in terms of our approach. And we hold sessions with parishes, with yourselves. We've got a member training session, for example, in a couple of weeks' time, which is going to focus on legislation updates and enforcement. Bit of a plug, so please do come along. But that's where we do provide, because it's constantly changing, albeit the government have been very clear in both the NPPF and the practice guidance that it hasn't changed in terms of the approach. They've looked at it. Should planning enforcement become a criminal offence? No. That's been looked at, I don't know, half a dozen times over the last 20 years, I'd say. And they still come back to the view that no, it should be a discretionary service that's provided by local authorities, and they decide how they play it. Once you serve an enforcement notice and you get into any breaches of that, for example, then you are into criminal offences where we're down to prosecution. So, there is a stage, but generally, planning enforcement is that discretionary service. It's a judgment that you make or we make.
Could I just ask supplementary? Is it? Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Is it? My own perception is it's quite difficult to get planning enforcement officers because it's not as, how should I put it, sexy as a planning officer.
All planning sexy. You can say that, Councillor.
Is it difficult to get planning enforcement officers?
To be fair, it is a particular aspect of general planning that we do struggle to get officers. I mean, we're lucky in the sense that we have a team of enforcement officers, and actually what we have done and we do is we move people around the service so they get the experience and we grow our own. So we've done quite a bit of that to help ourselves, but as I said just now, we actually have recruited. It's taken us 2 years through headhunters. We have recruited an individual that started with us a month ago, and he has got some experience to sit behind him, which is exactly what we needed. So yeah, it is challenging, but we have got there, and we have got we've got a full team with some agency staff.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Chair, for letting me come in.
That's all. Let's go back to Mocky. I'm going to ask in a minute if Joe wants to ask questions, and then we'll come back.
It's just really a point of clarification. These figures and these tables, are they for South or South and Vale?
South.
Okay, fine.
Different table for that.
Okay, fine. That's good. Because I just want to clarify that. Okay, fine.
No, that's good. That's good. Councillor Rob, I don't know. She sent in some questions. I don't know if she's there online, but do you want to ask those questions?
Just normally making a sandwich.
Everyone here, good evening. Was that Mark Minion having a joke at my expense?
Not at all. No, that would be inappropriate.
I think that was Councillor Arlett. I'm here. I sent some questions through, but thank you very much to Anne-Marie and to Adrian, because they've largely all been answered. One thing I did want to ask was regarding when a planning application is made, the enforcement file is then closed. As I understand it, that's the proposal. I just wanted to check, because clearly at times the planning application will be refused and then the matter will bounce back into the enforcement system and team, and then the enforcement case will presumably be reopened. Is that the case? I just wanted to check that that's going to be as seamless as it can be, and that communities can be reassured that should a planning application be refused, that it's not going to disappear into the ether, that all the data, all the information is going to remain live.
Absolutely, Joe, because I asked the same question of our officers. And furthermore, I think what I was also concerned about is that it doesn't go back to square one. So, you know, it gets picked up where it was left off, if you see what I mean. And also if something in addition needs to happen to it. So I guess the other flip side is if it's approved and there are conditions that need monitoring. So it comes back into enforcement, but with monitoring for those conditions as opposed to the original breach.
Fantastic, thank you. And one final thing, I just wanted to make sure that when that happens, in an ideal world, the officer who has the most experience with the case, who's been dealing with that enforcement file, it would be great if it could go back to that person. We can't always guarantee that, though, can we? Because, you know, time passes, people move on, etc. But I imagine that where possible, you would strive to do that to ensure continuity.
Right.
Correct, he says, nodding his head.
Thank you. You go to Councillor Cooper, then back to Councillor Arnott.
Thank you. I do agree very much with what Anne-Marie and Adrian said about the need to comply with the legislation, and I'm always pointing out to people that we're really very constrained in what we can do, and don't have a great many teeth involved in enforcement at all. One area where I wonder if we can do a bit more is in communication. Most things improve communication. And you've said we can't have a monthly report that's being fed back. But I mean, I've got a case in my ward, one of my wards, and I've just recently, the parish council perceives that nothing was being done ever. But I've just had a detailed response back from the enforcement officer who's been following this, and the amount that's gone on that I was unaware of, the parish council were unaware of, and it explains an awful lot. I'm wondering if we can have a system where, I mean, it's actually one site with several issues on it. Every time a case is closed, and you might say it already happens, but I haven't seen it, that the local members and the parish council are both notified of what's happened when you close that particular bit of the case.
They certainly are well, they're given an update. Adrian will go into what they're given. I'm not so sure. But I think what I'd really like to encourage members, because we know that as members, we can go and get that information from officers, as you say. So it's worth.
But when do we go?
Well, I mean, I think what I would quite like to see, and if this is possible, Adrian, not sure, but with the new system as well, something I'd also like to see whether it's possible or not. And I think it may have come up at the Vale Scrutiny too, is whether ward members could have some sort of notification of what's happening in their ward, just so we can then go to the officers and perhaps get more information for our own purposes, so that we can actually go to the parish councils, not to tell them what's happening, but we can then say to them, you know, there is work going on this. We can reassure you, work is going on. It's very much a live application, and you can say with absolute confidence, because you know from the information you've been given, without having to give them information.
Well,
you can give them that confidence.
Half of what was in this.
Yeah. But you can ask at any point in time. You can go and ask.
But I've no reason to unless the parish council raises it. I mean, I don't go looking for things to do from it or not. There's always more than enough.
Did you want to pick up on that?
No, that's it. That's what the committee thinks is an idea for improvement. We can certainly have a look at that. I mean, we before we did the changes, we used to provide almost like a list of the enforcement cases which is by ward, so we can pick that out, because in the system it just tells you there's an enforcement case that's been logged and it's been closed. When we're closing, we do write to the person that made the complaint and explain. We don't currently include that with the ward member, because I think you've got enough correspondence as it is. But if you have a particular interest, then we would log you on the system, so then you would be notified.
I would rather have these things. I don't mind having lots of emails that I just skim through and pass on.
Okay. Well, not pass on, because obviously.
Well, no, I don't know. Leave them in there, or sometimes just delete them.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Arlett.
Yeah, this is probably for Adrian again. What we've decided in Henley is that there's 3 district councils, and basically I deal with all the planning issues. And I tried to attend all their planning meetings. So they have 2 meetings every 6 weeks, and I tried to go. And there's an item on the agenda there about outstanding applications and enforcement, and it seems to work fairly well, dare I say, because they can ask the questions. I can then go back to the planning officer and obviously speak to them, and we do seem to get things resolved. So I'm the kind of the contact, and it does work out well. And actually, look at their last agenda. The list is fairly low on enforcements and outstanding applications that have been going on for a while. Very, very low, mainly because they've now got a contact between the town, me, and the plan officer. And that's why I said to Mr. May, but if they're going to have ad hoc meetings all over the place, it's a bit tough on the district councillor to take up that position. I'm sure if they had set meetings, it would be easier for a district council or a local councillor, to be their point of contact. I would have thought.
Yeah.
And that's why I get all the problems, Adrian, between me and you. No, I think the thing is there a system that will work between the complainant, the district councillor, and the officer? Because if they're not getting a response from the officer, or seems to be Mr. May saying that, the district council then is your point of contact.
Yeah, I mean, again, that links back to the fact that the suggestion that's been made, whether you agree or not, about whether we can bring in a system that does notify you of new cases that are open in your ward and cases that are closing your ward on a monthly basis, which would be the key from my point of view. Is about the more I can do that's automated, the more it can happen. If it means I've got to get member staff to do something particularly that's taking them out doing the everyday job, then that's going to be a resource issue that I need to balance. And obviously it's your decision, but that's that. If it can make it automated, then I will do my best to do that.
The final question.
Well, hang on, I've just got a question I'd like to put in, if that's all right. And
Might be quick, and then you can have
I
fun.
don't think it will be. I don't believe.
Would it be true to say there's no money in enforcement?
Okay.
Well, like
No money.
planning, with plan applications, when there's money in plan applications. But enforcement, is there any money in it for the council?
No, there's no money for the
Better
council.
drain.
There's cost for applicants and risk for applicants,
Yeah.
absolutely, but
Yeah.
nothing for the council.
Okay.
I just tried to ask, because I didn't see in the report much specifically about listed buildings. Is that a separate thing, or you're included in all the cases? Is the listed buildings?
We don't get many, but we do get a few.
We get some, and I believe that the law is stricter on
Yes.
this. Like you said, you can put stop notices on because obviously you don't want to have the work done that can't be undone.
Correct.
And I have in my ward, I have quite a lot of listed buildings, and there's quite a few cases coming and going. Is that, and I have some unhappy parishes actually about those. Is it helpful to bring those cases out separately and show them as separately, separate in reports, or any monitoring on those separately?
Yeah, I mean,
a couple of cases where things haven't, if you like, the parish are worried about a building.
Yeah.
The enforcement team has believed what the owner said, and later on that's found to be not the case. So I don't know whether, obviously you can't go into every building, you're not police force, etc. But is there some more that can be done? And I do have some quite unhappy people where these things have been found to be in dire straits, the building.
Yeah, I mean, there may be a balance there between a breach of planning or breach of listed building consent, for example, or actually the condition of the building. If it's about the condition of the building, that would be the conservation and the heritage team that would look at it, where we have a different process in terms of notices that we can serve. Or if it's a breach of planning or listed building consent, that's the enforcement team. So I think we need to focus on the enforcement, because that's what we're looking at here today, isn't it? So, but I mean, I would say there's a handful of cases that are listed building related, because most people who have listed building generally are clear about what they've got to do or what they can't do on the property. So I would say we have only a small number of breaches in terms of listed building sites and such. Most of our sites, and they may be more complex. It's usually more general planning and mixed uses is the privilege that we have.
High points for listed buildings on the point scoring. The triage system. It gets extra points for listed building. Yeah. That's helpful. Thank you. Joe, you don't want to ask your question now, is that right?
My only question was actually about this monthly information, or the information about when a case is closed. Could we please have the detail about what is the manner of the closure? So if it be because it's gone to a planning, into the planning application system, or if there's been voluntary compliance, could we get that detail when that information comes through, possibly?
I think it's something we're looking at doing, aren't we? Definitely with this monitoring report, that's what we're trying to sort of get more information on. I think you want it from a management point of view, and we want it from an information point of view, as you pointed out. I think it'd be useful to actually know exactly that, and also what aren't breaches. This might be more the communications team with Mark Minion. So when people report breaches, I think it's your team that probably does the initial first decision, and I don't think we're actually picking up how many of those reports.
That was something that when Vale considered their report, they picked up the customer services team do that initial front door process. So actually, is this a potential breach? And do the planning team, Adrian's team, need to look at that in some detail? And there are some that we reject because it's not in that sphere. And clearly, we do that through advice and guidance. We don't just make a win. And one of the things that Vale suggested was, can we have a look at those cases and say, actually, are the common themes in here that we need to be better at communicating to residents? And that's something we are looking at. And Sally Truman, who works with me, has shared some initial information with Adrian that we're looking at the moment.
Good, helpful, thank you. So, Committee, what are we well, we're not going to debate as such, but do we have some recommendations out of that we want to specifically bring out? I think
well, yes, more feedback for parish councils, because that's fairly obvious. They need to know what's going on, and to members at the same time, so we know when things are. So that's sort of monthly update. Well, I'm not too worried about the frequency of it. It's just that I didn't even know some of the cases that are drawn to my attention the other day had even been opened, and I certainly didn't know they'd been closed either. So, but we want some specifics. I
just want, there's two different things here. So one, we talked about the idea of informing the complainant, the public, let's say, the town and parish council, the member of the public, that we're still investigating the black hole situation, and quite rightly, they're concerned, well, what's happened, I haven't heard anything. So that's one suggestion, which is something we can do as an automated process, and it would just be a communication. There'll be no update. It will just literally say, just to confirm, we're still investigating this particular case, and in accordance with our statement. That's one thing. Number two then is about you as members, in terms of wanting information that is new cases opened, and then when cases are closed, picking up what the member online has just asked for, which is when we close a case, we actually write to the complaint to explain why we closed it, the background. We provide that to you, perhaps in a table or something. Yeah. So I think that's what you're asking for you as members. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very brief summary to, you know.
Yeah. Well, that's I'm thinking of use of the resources. We're doing it once already to the customer, then we can provide that to you as members. So there's no updates though in between that you're asking for. It's just purely the open case.
I thought you said we could have a report of ongoing cases that were open or something you could do automatically.
Right. The member over here asked that question about having updates, a short report, and I haven't got resources to do that.
No, I think
we can provide you with the same comment, which is the case has been opened, and if it's beyond, let's say, 6 weeks or a month, whatever period, we confirm that it's still live. Yeah, and then when it does get closed, you get told it's closed with an explanation to why.
Yes, that's the key thing. Why is it being closed? Yeah, and what's the result?
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Okay, thank you. So I just want to get that clarity.
Yes. Okay, I think that's clear.
I'd like to say something in favour about planning enforcement.
Oh, thank you.
I had a difficult one where somebody moved onto a piece of land and set up home on it, mobile, and then tried to turn it into a traveller's site. Eventually put a planning application in, turned down, went to appeal, turned down. But before, and it became really complicated because sort of human rights issues, where the person all crept in it. And many of these enforcements are quite complicated, more complicated than you see on the surface. But I was able, before every parish council meeting in that particular parish, to phone either the head or the deputy of planning enforcement, and they would give me an exact statement I could give to the parish in an open meeting as to where we were. And whilst they thought it took a long time, they were quite satisfied that they knew that there was travel towards a solution. And so I think the councillor can be a bit more involved.
Yeah, when you Thank you. I think there's a discussion about the number of stop notices that were issued, but I think we've decided that it's not a measure of success. I don't know if that's if you want to pursue that or
well, I mean, I was happy with the answer that Adrian gave me. That in the last 3 months there have been 2 temporary stop notices served, because to me it's not a question of counting numbers, or even in a 3 month period there could be 0. It's the fact that people believe that is a sanction that you could use as the last resort, but and therefore they would be careful what they do, because that could cost them an awful lot of money.
And that information is both on our website as the enforcement register, but also on the government statistical website.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, if I may, I think it's important for people to recognise that there are all different tools applied for planning enforcement that we can apply. That's one of the tools, and I think sometimes there's a disproportionate focus on sort of the perceived bad apples who go out there and deliberately, try and play the planning system. Well, actually, what planning enforcement shows you, and I'm hoping, as we go forward and have more data about it and things, that that it shows that the majority of people are wanting to do the right thing if you bring them back into it and make them aware that they have, committed a breach. And I remember one officer telling me that there are lots of different, when you look at a planning application, there are perhaps lots of different forms of a planning application that could be approved. So I would like to just give one little more positive pitch also for the retrospective planning application. I know it gets parish councils certainly and residents very upset. You just need the word retrospective in front of planning application. They get very cross. But it is an opportunity to bring it back out into the public. We've talked about how so much information has to be held, sort of within the investigation. It's that opportunity when it comes back out into the public and the public can comment on it. And I think it sort of could be seen as a positive aspect to retrospective planning and that aspect of enforcement.
So, and just following up on that, I think there's something that Joan wrote in an email to me. Is there something we should do or could do a bit more about our communications? And she compared it with blighting. Obviously, that is there a bit more that we can do to celebrate the work of the council and also just let people like parishes and residents know?
Yeah.
I
think that was a really interesting. That was a really interesting one for me because my immediate reaction would be yes, that'd be great. And then I thought, well, what aspects are we going to talk about? Because if you only talk about and it has hit the press. I think there was one particular enforcement case that hit the press, quite a big one in South, which I won't mention. But what about all those positive cases? How do you put that forward? So I'm going to pass that one to the comms team actually, because I don't know the answer.
The comms team. It is an interesting one, and Councillor Simpson makes a good point. What are you celebrating with that? That we've done our job. We've upheld the planning system. I reflect on the cases that go to local government ombudsman, and Aileen and I had a discussion earlier about this. In most cases, the Ombudsman backs our position of what we've done on the enforcement because residents are rightly upset. They've complained through the process. They've gone to the Ombudsman and the Ombudsman said, actually, the council's done the right thing here. There are very, very few in my time here where we had a decision against us. I can't even remember that. Let me think about the comms picture. I think it's more about being proactive on what you can do and what you can't do with planning enforcement. The video that Alice mentioned earlier, can we do more about promoting that for the parishes and residents, saying, look, this is actually the parameters we're operating within, but have a look at this before you start that process, being more proactive in that way.
And perhaps those examples of what is, again, through that, what is planning, what does fall under planning enforcement and what perhaps falls under those other aspects that the council deal with.
We'll certainly look at individual cases to see whether there's perhaps themes that can draw out rather than saying resident X or householder B did this or that and the other. It's more, these are some of the common things that we're getting that people are complaining about that we've done the right thing with. Maybe.
One
more. What should we just say one more and then we'll draw this to a close?
Okay. One of the things I had on my list of things to bring up was whether we should be doing more lobbying as a council to central government to give us some more teeth in some cases. But I think actually it's not an appropriate time. I'd rather wait and see what's going to come out of the planning legislation that's coming on. So I hope we're going to get a session to update councillors on the new acts when they come into force, please.
We will do that. I also have something happening in session in a fortnight's time, 25th of November. But there's a legislation update and planning enforcement that we're going to be covering for members. The legislation will be as we know it, because obviously, as the cabinet member mentioned, the planning structure is still a bill, hasn't yet become an act. When it becomes an act, we're much clearer then about what will be followed through.
Isn't there anything within can get notice that something might change?
Yeah, I mean, we can set out what the intentions are, what the proposals are. We can talk about LAURA, which is the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, which has got some secondary legislation. So we've made some changes, for example, in the enforcement statement, which is about temporary stop notices. One example where the period is being granted longer, it was 28 days, now 56 days, which is helpful to us. So things like we can just clarify. It is, some of it is very technical and probably boring for some members, quite exciting for us as officers, but we certainly can share as much as we can that hopefully will be helpful to you.
Okay, good. We captured enough of the actions that we've and recommendations, Michael. Thank you. And so the committee's happy. We'll move on to the next item. I have just been alerted that I missed out item 8, which is updates from previous scrutiny meetings, but I don't believe.
This procedural that we do item 8.
But yes, so item 8, we don't have any.
Quick comment, really, because one of the things we were looking at the last scrutiny meeting was the outturn from, last year.
Yes.
And I think members in general were pretty happy with revenue because it was more or less on spec. But we were quite concerned about capital expenditure, and so earlier today, some of us were in the grants budget. We heavily oversubscribed, so I put forward a suggestion, like I did the last time when we were dealing with revenue grants, to say when we get to the end of the financial year, can we see if there are any underspends that can be fired into the capital grants budget? And it was decided it'd be easier to just add it on to next year's budget. I wanted to try and do some more later in the year, but it was to be too complicated. So it is a follow-up on what we said last time, actually.
Yeah, okay, good. I'm not quite sure what to do with that, but it's useful to hear that. Thank you. And the recommendation from the financial outturn is in the minutes from the last meeting. So if we move on to the last item on the which is South Oxfordshire Local Plan 2035 review, and we have again Cabinet Member Councillor Simpson, and we have Tim and Ricardo online to help us with that. So I'll hand over to you. Thank you. Okay, so the Council has a statutory duty to review the adopted South Oxfordshire Local Plan within 5 years of its adoption. The purpose of this review is to determine whether any revisions to the adopted plan are necessary. To meet this requirement within the statutory timeframe, Cabinet must make a decision to conclude the review process by 10th of December 2025. The review is the process of assessing whether adopted local plan needs any changes or updates, and this report to Cabinet will fulfil this obligation. So just to be clear, I'll repeat that. The review is the process of assessing whether our adopted local plan needs any changes or updates, and this report to Cabinet will fulfil this obligation. This review has taken place in a context where the Council has already decided to prepare a joint local plan with Vale of White Horse District Council, which once adopted will replace the South Oxfordshire Local Plan 2035. For the purpose of this review, which requires a decision by the 10th of December 2025, the report recognises the current uncertainties surrounding the progress of the joint local plan. And I think you'll see that from paragraph 10 of the report. The report concludes that within the timeframe available for this decision, the joint local plan cannot currently be fully relied upon to proceed to adoption as the future replacement for the South Oxfordshire Local Plan. This uncertainty matters because in this context, the review can only conclude that no revisions are needed if it determines that no revisions to any part of South Oxfordshire Local Plan are required. The report explains that Policy Strat 2, which sets the housing requirement in the adopted local plan, cannot be considered up to date if the joint local plan examination does not progress further. This is because the current National Planning Policy Framework uses a different methodology for calculating housing need than was in place when the local plan was prepared. Any future revisions to the South Oxfordshire local plan, whether undertaken now or later, would need to reflect this updated national approach. So the housing requirement in Policy Strat 2 is around 60% of the government's current standard method figure for South Oxfordshire, and therefore cannot be regarded as up to date. Because of this, it is unnecessary to assess each individual policy in the plan at this stage. Whatever that exercise might now show, the conclusion would remain that the housing requirement will need to be revised if the joint local plan does not progress. The report therefore recommends that Cabinet approve the conclusion of the review, and defer decisions on the scope, form and timetable for the preparation of any revisions to a later date through an up-to-date local development scheme. This will allow time to consider the outcome of the correspondence with the Planning Inspectorate about the joint local plan and to explore alternative plan-making options if the joint local plan cannot proceed. The Council can be confident that the recommendation to Cabinet complies fully with legislative requirements and represents the most efficient and appropriate course of action. So thank you, and I'm ready for questions.
Thank you. Is there anything that Tim or Ricardo want to add to that before we get to questions?
Nothing from me.
Good. So you'll note, committee, that the recommendations are the recommendation to Cabinet. So this is just us for us to review and make some comments on that. And the recommendation that Cabinet approve Regulation 10A review of the South Oxfordshire Plan 2035 and decide that the local plan should be revised in relation to what Councillor Thompson said and the timetable to be decided at a later date. So we start with questions. Go on, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. Yes, I don't have any problem with what's set out here at all. I just wondered if you could give us a little bit more information about the work involved in doing a new local development scheme, please.
Yeah, I think, as you appreciate from what I've just said, actually, that the recommendation of the report just ensures that we meet our statutory requirement to carry out a review within 5 years. It actually purposely defers decisions on the nature and timetable of any revisions to the local plan to a future update of the local development scheme, the LDS, which is the appropriate mechanism for such decisions, and will be done when there's more news on the joint local plan. We are still in the process of the examination.
Yeah.
So this approach provides a better opportunity to consider plan-making options alongside the outcome of correspondence that we may get from the inspectors on the joint local plan and other relevant factors such as local government reorganisation, council budgets, and of course the new development, spatial development strategies coming forward. But one thing I do want to reassure you, because I know how interested you've been in planning ever since I first met you, Sue, as is most members on the council, that we will absolutely make sure that members are involved at the appropriate stages through the council's established, plan making and governance processes. It's something we've made sure we've done all the way along with the joint local plan, and we'd continue to do that. So the immediate decision to be made by Cabinet at the moment, that's coming up, is to complete the Regulation 10A review, which is this, confirming that the update to the local plan is necessary. So in terms of the local development scheme, it will set out, in due course, it will set out which of the several routes is recommended, and it will be prepared by officers in the policy team working with me as Cabinet member, and seeking a steer through the joint local plan steering group before coming to full council. So it is a decision for the future. It's not for tonight. It's not for discussion tonight because we are in the middle of an examination.
Can I phrase my question differently then? What do local development schemes have in them? What are they dealing with?
Ricardo, would you like to answer that one?
Yes, surely. So local development scheme is a document that sets out a schedule and a timetable for all the policies that the council has for planning. So we already have a local development scheme.
It sets out that we have an adopted local plan. It sets out all the neighbourhood plans that we have adopted and under preparation, and it sets a timetable for a joint local plan. So it is a document that we already have, and any decision that the council makes in the future for producing new planning documents would have to go into that document and approved by full council. But it's basically it is a document that sets out the schedule of the documents that the council is producing.
Thank you. Right, good. Thank you. Councillor Robb online has put her hand up.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks, Anne-Marie. My question relates to paragraph 30. I think there's no dispute about the fact that we're required by law to agree to this, what's being recommended this evening. But I did want to ask about paragraph 30, which really stuck out for me. And, sort of the key points are other implications. The council will need to assess its housing land supply against the new standard method figure of 1,235 dwellings a year. This is higher than the annualised target of 961 per year as set by the adopted local plan 2035. Could I just ask, is this new requirement to come into effect immediately, or once we approve this decision? And I wonder what the likely impact is on our ability to defend refusals at appeal. And I wonder also about the likely impact on the enforceability of some of the other policies that we have in our local plan, our current local plan, such as ENV1 landscape and countryside and DES 10 carbon reduction. So anything that any light you're able to shed would be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Jo. I'm afraid that questions about the 5-year housing land supply fall outside of this review, outside the scope of this review. The other implications section of the report that you refer to, the paragraph 30, simply notes the factual position that the future 5-year housing land supply statements will need to be prepared using the new standard method. National planning policy requires the council to identify and update its supply of deliverable housing sites annually, as I think probably most of us are aware. Therefore, this is part of a separate and ongoing annual piece of work, the preparation of the 5-year housing land supply statement. And it's beyond the remit of this report, which is before you. But I will be able to respond to you as Cabinet Member about the 5-year housing land supply once that work has been completed and published. I don't know if Ricardo wants to step in. I think you had a question on enforceability of policies.
Yes, absolutely. It's just to flag that the review itself won't directly affect on the enforceability of our policies, on the basis that the tilted balance that you're referring to in terms of the 5-year land supply, that is already in play. And this has been the case for a number of months. So the review itself does not change that factual position. Now, policies such as ENV1 and DES 10 are very important in decision making because they form part of the consideration of whether the adverse impact of granting permission for a proposed development, whether that significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. So even in a situation where paragraph 11 of the NPPF is in play, the tilted balance, those policies are still very important and relevant.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Ricardo. Thanks, Anne-Marie.
Councillor Cole.
Thank you. Do you think that the joint local plan will actually get through? And the other thing is, what protects South more, joint local plan or just a South only plan?
I think I haven't got the crystal ball that tells me what the inspectors are going to do next. So I can't answer your first question. And your second question is definitely outside the scope of this review.
I'm just asking for your opinion, your thoughts.
Yeah.
Your thoughts are?
Well, I'd very much like to think that the inspectors are considering our letters, and we'll have to see what happens to the joint local plan. I mean, it's still in play, it's still examination.
Would you prefer joint local
any
plan
decision,
or the South one?
The one that we've been working on, I think, is obviously the one that one would support, I would have thought. What had support of full council?
Can I ask the officer,
Mm.
what would protect South more? Would it be a joint local plan or a South local plan?
A local plan.
No, which one would protect South?
Protect them from what
Speculative applications, land supply, all sorts. So at the moment, we're going for a joint local plan and it's halted. So is it better for us to have just the local plan for South?
Well, I think that's what this
Yeah, I know.
this
That's what
paper
we've
is
got.
coming, and I think this is outside what we're here to discuss.
I mean, we have a local plan for South at the moment, and we have a joint local plan at examination.
But it's
That's the reality, isn't it?
Well,
So we're
so-
waiting, and we're waiting to hear. And you know, I think perhaps you're almost sort of like jumping the gun ahead and looking ahead and doing sort of bit of
Can I
what's going
bring
to
in
happen next
Ricardo
year.
here? Would you like to put your hand up?
Just to flag that in terms of protection and meeting the relevant statutory requirements, the council is required to keep up-to-date policies. So we do have an adopted local plan that we are in the process of undertaking this review to establish whether it needs any updating or not, but it is the adopted plan and it continues to have weight and continues to be used in decision making. We have an emerging joint local plan that carries weight in decision making as well. So the decision over whether the council should in the future produce a local plan for South of Vale is a decision for council. But the position is that we currently have planning policies that guide our decision making, and we are at examination in a process that is aimed at bringing an up-to-date suite of policies to eventually replace our local plan.
Councillor Turner.
I don't see anything in this which is going to affect our next joint local plan. A question really. We have penciled in a date which is only about, well, less than a month away now for a full council meeting to discuss a response to the Secretary of State's request that we withdraw. Compliment the letter which was sent, which was very polite, as you pointed out in the past, and we're now waiting a response back from that. My question is, when we get that response back, will that come to scrutiny before Cabinet discusses the recommendation or not?
I think that is definitely outside of the scope of what we're discussing tonight, because we're actually talking about the review of our current local plan. And you know, we are still waiting to hear back from the inspectors. So obviously any decision making, which is what you're asking, and the process for that decision making going forward is definitely something for the steps ahead, but not something we're, you know, able to really discuss tonight under this particular item.
With no indication of when we'll get this response from the Secretary of State.
Again, it's that inspector's crystal ball.
Yeah. Okay.
Or it's my crystal ball to the inspectors, which unfortunately I have no gift for.
Thank you.
But just to remind you, in terms of the actual decision that will need to be made about any further steps, that will be a full council decision.
Yeah.
Yes.
And as I'd sort of like to reassure, you know, we've always wanted to bring members along with anything to do with the joint local plan or local planning. So it's not going to be something that suddenly hits you by surprise.
I just have a question, well, a clarification really, and it's in around that paragraph 30 in relation to housing supply revision. I'm just interested in when that gets triggered, that we start to, if this revision goes ahead, and it, you know, I don't see any objections to option one, that you go ahead and there's no other recommendations. But at what point does that then get, you revise the South Oxfordshire local plan, at what point are we the housing land supply is triggered against the new requirement.
At the moment, it's a review. Where the decision we're making tonight is for review.
Yes.
So any talk about the revision, or that's for the future. So,
and it all depends what happens with the joint metropolitan plan, presumably this.
Well, no, the review that we're discussing tonight doesn't depend on the joint local plan. So the decision tonight is quite straightforward.
Talking about the other implications, I understand that we're agreeing a review, or we're not agreeing, or cabinet is being asked to agree a review.
But there's no time in there.
The time is actually, we need to do the review by the 10th of December 2025. So for the purposes tonight,
what I'm hearing, nobody's objecting to that, and that seems like that's something that we think that cabinet will consider. We don't have anything else to say about that. But when the housing land supply gets measured against the new one, all depends. What you're saying is it all depends on what happens with the joint metropolitan plan and what this review.
No, but I'm saying with 5-year housing land supply, that will that will be for discussion when we have the five-year housing land supply annual statement. That can be questions once that's produced and going forward. But I mean the standard. I don't know. Did you want to come in on that, Ricardo?
Surely the local development scheme will tell you when you're going to do something.
So just to complement Anne-Marie's response, it is part of a separate piece of work that is ongoing. So national policy sets out that the council has to identify the supply of housing yearly. So it is something that we have to do every year. Our last 5-year land supply statement was produced in January. So it was produced alongside the submission of our joint local plan. It is a process that the council undertakes on a yearly basis. We have to look at applications. There is a certain baseline. It is common practice for councils to operate on a similar fashion to the financial year. So you would look from the 1st of April to the 31st of March to the following year. So it is work that is currently underway. So it is not possible to say that this would apply on a certain date, but it is likely that it would apply once the council publishes its 5-year land supply statement. So once that piece of work is concluded and the council publishes that, being it in April or earlier on a different date, that would be the point where national policy already tells us, and the report in paragraph 30 signposts us to the factual position that when our policies are more than 5 years old, unless this review concludes that they don't need updating, that we would need to move to the standard method. So that is a factual position. And a new 5-year land supply statement that is produced in the context of that review taking place and identifying that changes are needed would need to be looking at the standard method. So the short answer is when the 5-year land supply statement work is complete and published, that would be the point that the new calculations would come into force. And that would be the point as well where the cabinet member would be in a position having all the facts in hand to comment and answer questions about any implications.
Thank you. That's clear. Councillor Topping.
Am I right in assuming that basically this is just a mechanism that we're going through a process to get to say that we're going to do a review before the drop-down deadline of the 5th, is it the 5th of December? But we're not actually doing the review.
This is the review to say that we need to look at it.
Right, but we're not then going to do any updates to the existing plan, pending the fact that the joint local plan might be approved or not, and pending what's going to come out of Ricardo's investigation and into the 5-year supply.
Well, that's a separate issue, 5-year supply. So what we're looking at, what we're saying is this is the review to say, do we need to update our local plan?
Yes.
And what officer's recommendation is
Yes, we
to
do.
say yes because of the housing requirement.
But then we're not actually going to do anything very much.
That's
I
the
get
next
impression
step.
we're
So
putting it
if
on
you look in your report, I think it talks about a review, revision, and replacement. So this is the review. The revision and replacement is for the future, particularly, based on the fact that we've got
We've
this
already done all
uncertainty
that.
around.
Yeah.
We've got the uncertainty around the joint local plan. So,
Okay.
but obviously it's something that will involve all members.
So this is an incredibly simple decision.
Yes.
Basically.
Yes. I can completely understand why we all want to know what's going to happen next. I completely understand that. I wish I knew. Yeah.
Yeah. Was a bit of a no-brainer.
When we do this 5-year land supply, which Hardo has just been referring to, will that include sites in the current local plan for which we've received no planning application?
I think that's for a different discussion and a different evening.
Yeah, I think it probably is. I think we're probably.
I think I'm trying to bring you back to the topic of the.
I think we're straight to
scrutiny.
I think Ricardo made that statement, which I think was very helpful about when that will happen.
But with respect, Ricardo did mention the 5-year land supply, which prompted me to ask the question.
But that in turn assesses how likely things are to come.
Yeah, and I suggest that scrutiny members could email Ricardo and ask those questions specifically. But I think we're straight outside. I think Councillor Topping is exactly right. This is quite a straightforward and simple noting report, really. Yeah. And this is what Cabinet with option 1 and
I propose that we agree.
And you propose
recommendation.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I'll
second that. Okay, thank you. And just on a process and technical point, just to go back to the last item, I've been reminded that. Can we vote? Can we vote on this one?
In a second.
We've got proposed in a second. Sorry, we're whizzing ahead here. Proposed in a second. Can we all vote that we know the report? Okay.
Fighting over this.
Just
Try not to.
Just on the previous item, I've just been reminded that we should have a proposer and seconder for those recommendations. I don't know if they're quite in a form to be read back out, but I think we all agreed at the time that those recommendations that we discussed
on planning enforcement.
On planning enforcement.
So should we support the Vale's comments as well?
Is that something that everybody would you like?
What I've written down here, you've got 2 recommendations in your report that the Scrutiny Committee considers the current performance in certain enforcement cases and received an update in relation to outstanding cases, and B, review suggested areas for improvement to support more effective and timely resolution of planning enforcement cases. And I think there was general consent and assent for those things. The other 2 recommendations you made to the Cabinet member, I would suggest, are feedback to councillors and parishes when cases are still open and when they are closed, the reasons for those closures. And secondly, looking at more positive comms, communications, and the outcomes of cases being followed. So those are 2 further recommendations to Councillor Simpson that were made. So those are what I've written down, which I think we can summarise in better English when I go away.
Thank you. We can have a proposal and second for those in a second. Councillor Arlett, you wanted to say you wanted to.
No, just ask a question.
They're going to go ahead. Claire's going to go ahead.
So should we just leave those?
I wish to leave those, and I think we should just make
Okay,
our
fine. Yeah.
So should we have a proposal that we agree those recommendations go ahead?
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Topping. Seconder. Gregory, can we vote on that?
Yeah, all right.
Thank you. That makes it formal. And rubbish. So I think that's. Thank you very much, Councillor Simpson, for coming very much. And that close the meeting.
Susie, can we stop the broadcast, please?